Most people think they're on track financially. A 2023 Northwestern Mutual study found that 67% of Americans describe themselves as financially prepared for the future, but less than 10% of people under 40 own even 3 of the 6 assets that actually build lasting wealth. But here's the thing, it's not about income. It's not about how hard you work. It's about what you own. Today I'm breaking down the exact 6 assets, the exact numbers, and the exact order they matter. Let's start with something most people get completely wrong. The average American household income sits around $74,000 a year. Sounds reasonable, but that number is a lie. Not because it's false, but because it's the average. The median, the number where half of America sits above and half sits below, is closer to $56,000. That gap exists because a small number of extremely high earners pull the average up. So if you're earning $60,000 right now, you're already ahead of the majority of working Americans. That's not motivation talk. That's the actual data from the U.S. Census Bureau 2023. But here's what that salary does not tell you. Earning more has almost nothing to do with the 6 assets I'm about to walk you through. Because these assets are not bought with a big paycheck. They're built with decisions. And the first one is the one almost nobody starts with. Asset 1. A cash-generating emergency foundation. Not an emergency fund. Not a savings account that sits there doing nothing. A properly structured liquid reserve that earns while it waits. Most financial advice tells you to keep 3 to 6 months of expenses in savings. That's correct in principle. But 57% of Americans can't cover a $1,000 emergency without going into debt, according to a 2023 Bankrate survey. That means the majority of people are one bad month away from dismantling everything else they've built. Here's what separates this asset from just having savings. The money needs to be in a high-yield savings account or a money market account, somewhere earning at least 4 to 5% annually, as of 2024 figures from the FDIC. On a $15,000 emergency reserve, that's $600 to $750 a year, doing nothing except sitting there. The moment you touch it for something that is not a genuine emergency, you've broken the asset. That's the discipline. A retired schoolteacher in Ohio once told me she had never invested a single dollar in the stock market until she was 38, but she had never once been without 6 months of expenses in cash. When the 2008 crash hit, she didn't panic sell. She didn't touch her 401k. She just waited. And when the market recovered, she was still whole. The people who lost everything in 2008 weren't just unlucky. Most of them had no floor. This is your floor. Without it, every other asset on this list becomes fragile. But does having a strong cash foundation mean you're building wealth? Not yet. That's the next layer. Asset 2. Index fund exposure, started before 35. This is where time becomes the most expensive resource you will ever spend. The S&P 500 has returned an average of 10.7% annually over the past 30 years, according to data from Morningstar. If you invest $300 a month starting at 25, by 40 you have roughly $126,000. If you start at 35 and do the same, you have $62,000. Same money, same discipline, a $64,000 difference, created entirely by 10 years. That's not a motivational statistic. That's compound interest working the way it actually works. And yet the most common reason people give for not investing is that they don't have enough to start. Fidelity and Vanguard both offer index funds with 0 minimum investment as of 2024. 0. The barrier isn't money. The barrier is the belief that you need to understand the market before you enter it. You don't. An index fund buys the entire market. You're not picking stocks. You're buying a small piece of every major company simultaneously. When one fails, the others carry it. Over a 20-year window, the S&P 500 has never produced a negative return. Never. Not once in any rolling 20-year period in recorded history. Most people hear that and still wait. They want to time it. They want to feel ready. They want to understand it better first. But here's what waiting actually costs. A 22-year-old who invests $100 a month and stops completely at 32 will retire with more money than a 32-year-old who invests $100 a month all the way until 65. The first person invested for 10 years. The second invested for 33. Compound interest doesn't care about effort. It cares about time. And if you haven't started, the second best day is today. But index funds alone won't make you wealthy before 40. They're the engine. What you need next is something that generates cash while you sleep. Asset 3. A real estate position. Any real estate position. Let me be precise here, because this is where people either overcomplicate it or completely dismiss it. You do not need to own a rental empire. You do not need to flip houses. You need a real estate position. That can mean 3 things. A primary residence with equity building, a rental property generating positive cash flow, or a REIT, a real estate investment trust, which lets you invest in real estate the same way you invest in index funds, through a brokerage account, starting with as little as $10. Here's why real estate belongs on this list before 40. According to the Federal Reserve's 2023 Survey of Consumer Finances, homeowners have a median net worth of $396,200. Renters have a median net worth of $10,400. That is a 38x difference. Now that gap isn't purely because of the house. Homeowners tend to have higher incomes and more financial stability overall. But the asset itself matters. Property does 2 things simultaneously. It appreciates in value over time. U.S. home prices have risen an average of 4.4% annually since 1991, according to the Federal Housing Finance Agency. And it forces you to build equity every single month through your mortgage payment, whether you feel motivated or not. That forced savings mechanism is something most people cannot replicate with a savings account. Because a savings account requires willpower every month. A mortgage requires nothing except keeping the lights on. The couple down the street who bought a modest 3-bedroom in 2014 for $210,000 and refinanced twice, that house is worth $380,000 today. They didn't do anything brilliant. They just owned something. But income and real estate still don't complete the picture. There's an asset most people in their 30s completely ignore, and it's the one that protects everything else. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because everything I've covered so far, the cash reserve, the index funds, the real estate, all of it assumes that you stay healthy, that your income stays stable, that nothing catastrophic interrupts the plan. But life doesn't work in straight lines. And the next 2 assets aren't about building wealth. They're about making sure you don't lose it. This is the part most financial content skips entirely. Because it's not exciting. It doesn't have a viral number attached to it. But in terms of actual financial outcomes before 40, these 2 assets separate the people who arrive at 40 intact from the people who arrive at 40 starting over. Asset 4. Adequate insurance, health, life, and income protection. The number 1 cause of personal bankruptcy in the United States is medical debt. Not bad investments, not overspending. Medical bills. A 2023 study published in the American Journal of Public Health found that 66.5% of all bankruptcies in the U.S. are tied to medical issues, either the bills themselves or income lost from being unable to work. That means 2/3 of financial collapses have nothing to do with financial decisions. They come from a single unexpected health event hitting someone who wasn't properly insured. Life insurance is not for you. It's for the people who depend on your income. A 30-year-old in good health can get a 20-year term life policy for $250,000 of coverage for around $15 to $20 a month. That's the cost of 2 coffees a week. Income protection insurance, also called disability insurance, covers 60% to 70% of your income if you're unable to work. The Social Security Administration estimates that 1 in 4 20-year-olds will become disabled before they reach retirement age. 1 in 4. That's not a fringe risk. That's a statistical probability that most people treat as if it only happens to other people. Insurance is not an asset in the traditional sense. It doesn't grow. It doesn't generate cash flow. But what it does is protect every other asset on this list from being wiped out by a single event outside your control. Think of it as the wall around everything else you're building. Now, the 5th asset is one that almost no one under 35 takes seriously, and it's probably the highest returning investment on this entire list. Asset 5. Invested human capital. Skills that compound. Every other asset on this list is external. The cash, the index funds, the property, the insurance, they all exist outside of you. Human capital is internal. And before 40, it is likely your largest asset by far. Here's what that means in real numbers. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, a worker with only a high school diploma earns a median of $853 a week. A worker with a bachelor's degree earns $1,334. A worker with advanced skills in a high-demand field, data, engineering, law, medicine, finance, can earn $3,000 to $5,000 a week or more. That gap is not just income. It's every investment that income could fund, every mortgage payment, every index fund contribution, every insurance premium. The return on a targeted skill investment can exceed any market return you'll ever see. A $3,000 course that qualifies you for a $20,000 salary increase pays back 566% in year 1 alone. The S&P 500 has never done that. But here's where most people stop. They invest in education once, school, and then consider their learning done. The people building serious wealth before 40 treat their skills like a portfolio. They diversify, they update, they invest continuously. A 34-year-old marketing manager who spent 2 years learning data analytics on evenings and weekends moved from a $65,000 salary to a $110,000 role. Same industry, same city, different skill set. The investment was time and roughly $1,200 in online courses. The return was $45,000 a year, compounding forward for the rest of her career. That's the highest returning asset most people already have access to and choose not to develop. But the 6th asset, this is the one that quietly determines everything. Asset 6. An ownership stake in something, a business, a side income, or equity. Here's the uncomfortable truth about employment. When you work a job, any job, you are paid for your time. And your time is finite. You can work harder. You can earn more. But the ceiling is always there. Ownership removes the ceiling. It doesn't require you to quit your job. It doesn't require startup capital. It requires that somewhere in your financial life, you have something that generates value beyond the hours you personally put in. That can be a small online business generating $800 a month. A royalty from something you created, equity in an employer through stock options or an ESOP, a partnership stake in a practice or firm, or even a single rental unit that produces $300 a month in cash flow after the mortgage. According to the Federal Reserve, the wealthiest 10% of Americans hold 93% of all business equity in the country. That concentration isn't because they're smarter or luckier. It's because ownership compounds in a way that wages never can. A business that generates $50,000 a year in profit can be sold for $150,000 to $250,000, 3 to 5 times earnings, because it has asset value beyond the work hours inside it. You have been building someone else's asset every single time you've gone to work. The question is whether you're also building one of your own. It doesn't have to be large. It has to exist. And if you're sitting there thinking, I don't have a business idea, I don't have startup money, I don't know where to begin, start with a skill from Asset 5. Turn it into a service. Charge for it. That's the beginning of ownership. Most people wait for the perfect idea. The people who build wealth before 40 start with an imperfect one and adjust as they go. Now let's zoom out for a moment, because this picture looks different depending on where you sit in the world. The Credit Suisse Global Wealth Report 2023 puts the median wealth per adult in the United States at approximately $107,000. That places the U.S. in the top 5 countries globally for median wealth. But here's the number that changes everything. According to the same report, roughly 53% of the world's adult population has total wealth below $10,000. More than half the world. So if you have a funded emergency account, some index fund exposure, and a small ownership stake in something, you are already in the top tier of global wealth distribution. Not American top tier, global top tier. Most people never hear that framing. Because comparison doesn't work globally, it works locally. You're not comparing yourself to someone in rural India. You're comparing yourself to your colleague who just bought a new car. Your friend who posted a holiday photo from Bali, your neighbor who renovated their kitchen. And that local comparison is what makes people earning $90,000 a year feel broke. There's a name for this. It's called reference group bias. You measure yourself against the people you can see. And the people you can see are rarely less successful than you. They're the people you follow on social media, the people in your industry, the people in your neighborhood. It's not a character flaw. It's how the human brain processes social information. But understanding the mechanism gives you a choice. You can keep measuring yourself against a moving target that will always make you feel behind. Or you can measure yourself against the 6 assets and ask honestly how many you actually own. So here's where we land. The 6 assets aren't a fantasy. They're not reserved for people who earn $200,000 a year or inherit family money. A cash foundation anyone can build, starting with $50 a month redirected. Index fund exposure anyone can open today, with zero minimum at most major brokerages. A real estate position in whatever form is accessible to your situation right now. Insurance protection that costs less per month than most streaming subscriptions combined. A skill set you actively invest in, the same way you'd invest money. And an ownership stake in something, anything, that generates value beyond your direct hours. Most people arrive at 40 having built 2 of these, maybe 3, and they wonder why wealth feels distant. The single most actionable thing you can do today is not to start all 6 at once. It's to identify which one you're missing most and close that gap first. But here's the question I want to leave you with. If wealth before 40 is mostly about what you own rather than what you earn, what exactly are you building right now that you could still own in 20 years?